Back to City Limits Stand-Up Desk here with Senator Tony Avella. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure.
Senator and mayoral candidate. So I'm a guy you meet on the street. You say you're running for mayor. I ask, why? What's the answer?
Very simply, I think we can do a better job of running the city of New York, and especially when it comes to zoning and urban planning. I always believe that every person in every neighborhood should have a real say in what happens in their own community. I think there should be planning from the bottom up and not from the top down. And that's what not only this administration, but several mayoral administrations have done. I think we can change the whole dynamic and make the city a better place for everybody.
And so you ran for mayor in 2009 in the primary against Bill Thompson and seeking to challenge Mayor Bloomberg. You were also a critic, as you mentioned, of him on rezoning. I remember going once to a mock trial Picture the Homeless had where you were a witness against the mayor.
Yes.
What are the differences between de Blasio and Bloomberg in their performance on those kind of issues?
It's very interesting. No, there isn't. And in fact, de Blasio has taken up a lot of the Bloomberg projects. And it's really a shame. I think I might be correct in saying that under de Blasio, there has not been one contextual rezoning that has gone on in the city of New York since he's taken
contextual,
office.
Just for viewers, meaning?
Contextual zoning means where we look at what the existing character of the neighborhood is and redefine the zoning category to reflect that. Because many times in 1961, when the city was rezoned for the first time comprehensively, they anticipated much more development than currently exists. So the zoning allowed for much greater development in many neighborhoods than what the current housing stock was. And you have a lot of 1 and 2, 3 family homes districts throughout the entire city that were zoned for apartment buildings, for example. And when I was in the city council and the Bloomberg administration, I sort of led the fight with Amanda Burden, who was then the chairperson of the City Planning Commission, to rezone many neighborhoods contextually. We still allowed for development, but we wanted to protect those neighborhoods where you had that suburban character of life in an urban environment. Unfortunately, de Blasio has done very little to continue that sort of legacy and that effort. And it's, if I can interject, it's very interesting that just the other day, I'm the lead plaintiff in a court case against the city of New York where de Blasio has backed up a Bloomberg plan to build a mega mall on park property next to City Fields. And we just had that case was just heard by the Court of Appeals.
Part of the ongoing Willets Point.
Correct. Well, there's Willets Point, which is where the auto body repair shops were, and then there's Willets West, which is the parking lot of City Fields, where the Bloomberg proposal and now, of course, the mayor's proposal with related companies, which is the largest developer in the city of New York, and Sterling Equities, which is the Mets, want to put the mega mall.
What's been the effect of that process of redevelopment plans? I know there's been some purchases on the businesses in Willets Point. Not very attractive businesses, but useful ones that repair cars.
Right. Exactly. It's very interesting because the city, under several administrations, and this goes back even to my days when I worked for Ed Koch, the city has left that area a blight. Not because of the businesses, but because the city didn't put a dime into infrastructure in the area. There were no sewers. There was no real water system. There was no roads. I mean, there were potholes all over the place. And the city, when Bloomberg took office, then he said, well, we have to clean this area up. And then de Blasio also continued it. If the city had just put in the infrastructure 20, 30 years ago, development would have taken care of itself and the property would have been too valuable for those type of operations to be there. I've always been a critic about it because the city wanted to kick out all these businesses, which were like hundreds of minority-owned businesses and 3,000 minority workers. So we kicked them out, supposedly for jobs, but there are no jobs there now. And basically, it's going to be reward developers, with tens of millions of dollars in profit. I think it's really the opposite of the American dream.
So get back to housing for a second. Do you think the city's in a housing crisis? And if so, how do you explain it? What do you think drives that crisis?
Well, there's no question the city's in a housing crisis. It has been for decades, even going back to the Koch administration. It's gotten worse lately, and for example, the homeless population increased dramatically under Bloomberg, but is increased exponentially on de Blasio. Part of the problem is, I really think the underlying problem, it's too expensive to live here. We have to start reducing costs to make it more affordable. And then we keep people in their apartments or in their homes. Instead of waiting for a person to be homeless, we should be helping them prevent foreclosure. We should be helping tenants avoid eviction. Because right now, a lot of people are just like one paycheck away from being evicted or being foreclosed. And it all comes down to it's too expensive to live here.
So how do you reduce costs?
Well, I think, when I was elected to the state senate, along with Governor Cuomo, we talked about reducing the property tax. Governor introduced a bill to a 2% property tax across the state, except for New York City. I've been fighting along with Senator Lanza from Staten Island to get that 2% property tax cap for New York City. Because right now, the middle class is starting to exit the city because the property tax is too high. Seniors can't afford to live here. If we placed a cap on the property tax, that would make it more affordable, and not only for property owners, but it would allow landlords then not to have to, constantly worry about increasing the rent, and it would make more affordable for tenants. Water and sewer rates. Even though de Blasio has not done double digits every year, it still goes up every single year. And I was around, again, in the Koch administration, when that proposal was to reduce water consumption. Now it's become a revenue-generating measure. So every year we just get increasing it and increasing it. You add the property tax, you add the income tax, you add the water and sewer rates, and every other fee that the city has, and that's the expense. So if we reduce some of these costs, we make it more affordable to people to live here, thereby less people will become homeless.
Let's talk about density for a second. What you said before about respecting that some neighborhoods are low density, 1 and 2 family homes detached, others have multifamily buildings, and zoning kind of to respect that history. That makes a lot of sense, but people also make the argument that doing it that way, you kind of reinforce existing inequalities in the city. People who have a nice low density neighborhood get to keep that neighborhood. Folks who are dealing with lots of people get lots more people. So how do you deal with the growth the city is expected to get in a fair way while also respecting that context?
Well, I always believe that people at the end of the day will do the right thing. So I don't believe in the NIMBY approach. I think you get the NIMBY approach when you have people when they're told what to do. If you involve people in the decision-making process, I think people would do the right thing. So there are places where we can build affordable housing, where we can get additional development. But the developers don't go there because they want to go to the areas where they can get the biggest bang for their buck, which is not necessarily those neighborhoods that need affordable housing. One of the things that I've been trying to change for a long time, and I actually have bills in the legislature to do this, is when we force a developer to do an affordable housing component as part of any development, we base that affordable housing component on the area median income, which is the AMI. Unfortunately, the AMI not only includes all of the city, it also includes Putnam County. At one point, it used to include Westchester and Long Island. So it would artificially drive up what the average median income is. So when we tell a developer, let's say, to go in a particular neighborhood, we want 80% of AMI. Well, that AMI most likely does not reflect the average income for that particular neighborhood.
It's out of step with it.
Right. So we're not helping the people who need the housing the most. The example I always use goes back to when I was in the city council, where we rezoned a part of Williamsburg Greenpoint. And the area, it was 80% of AMI, and it was like $60,000 for the affordable housing unit. But meanwhile, the average income was like $25,000. Right. So all we're succeeding in doing is pushing people out from their own neighborhoods who really need affordable housing. What I want to do is change that area median income to reflect either the borough area median income or the zip code. So if we're doing a development, it should reflect what the average income is for that neighborhood and help the people who need affordable housing.
What the city says, and they have for years when you talk to people about AMI, is they know it's skewed, but they have to do it that way because federal low-income housing tax credits and other benefits they use to support this housing is based on AMI and has to be based on it, so that if you were to try to change that, you have to come up with the money from somewhere. Right. What's your response to that?
That's absolutely not true. We can change the AMI. It's already been changed because at one point Westchester and Nassau were excluded from the city's metropolitan area median income, and now they have their own owned by county. So why can't we do the same thing? I mean, that's an argument that people say just not to do it. The other problem is we're forcing developers to do something they don't want to do. They're in the business to make a profit. So we're forcing them to do something that they're, with their hands tied behind their back, they're actually doing. What we have to do, and the last mayor to do it was Ed Koch, we have to put city taxpayer dollars into like a $5 billion bond and build affordable housing ourselves. The city has to build it.
Isn't the city doing that?
Not really, no. And then we can set our own rates for affordable housing. And the mayor isn't even fixing up the New York City Housing Authority, which is affordable housing.
But sorry, isn't he planning to build 80,000 units over 10 years?
It's over like 10 years. But again, we're relying on developers. That's part of the calculation. We're not doing it ourselves. And I've brought up for a number of years the fact that co-ops, for example, which is, even though they have shares in the co-op, they're individual unit owners. That's real affordable housing, yet the city has them taxed in terms of the property tax at a much higher rate than they should be. So, you can't talk about, I want to do affordable housing when you're not helping NYCHA, which is affordable housing, and you're really pricing co-ops out of business because of how high their property tax is. So he's talking out of both sides of his mouth.
You, I know, are not a fan of the proposal to legalize basement apartments. Some folks have said it's a reality in some neighborhoods. Folks have space, we need space, go ahead and use it. Why is that a bad idea?
There's a reason it's illegal. It's unsafe. Most basement apartments have only one exit and entrance, and that's through the actual rest of the apartment or the building. It's substandard housing. And if we talk about giving everybody due in this city and real affordable housing and treating people with dignity, why do we want to stick people in basements? I mean, I think that's really unfair for the families, but it's also not safe.
If owners were required to have two exits, would that make it okay?
It's still not appropriate because you're in effect violating zoning. So if let's take a one-family home neighborhood, which is zoned R2. So you're going to allow legalized basements. So in effect, overnight, you're changing the density of that zoning category. You're in effect throwing out the zoning code because overnight you could literally be doubling the zoning, the amount of capacity, occupancy in any neighborhood. So why do we have zoning if he's going to do that? And there's a reason why. Again, it's never been legal because it's historically unsafe.
So Mayor de Blasio has a plan to attack homelessness, a new plan to attack homelessness, including building, I think, 90 new shelters over 5 years. What do you think of that plan, and do you expect to see some shelters in your district?
No.
Why not?
Well, first of all, it took him 3 years to recognize that he has a problem because he kept blaming it on Bloomberg. He recognized the problem too late in his administration. Now they're probably talking about some of the right things, putting more money into foreclosure prevention and eviction prevention. That's the way we should be doing it. About a year and a half ago, maybe it's already 2 years. No, it's about a year and a half ago. He came out with this proposal to, I'm going to hire police and we're going to hire more people and we're going to go around every street and encourage the homeless on the street to go to the shelter. And everybody who's familiar with the problem knows that that was going to fail because nobody wants to go to the shelter because they're not safe. They don't get the services that they need. I said at the time it was ridiculous, and history has shown me to be correct. It hasn't worked because they don't want to go to the shelter. What we need to do is improve the conditions in the shelters that already exist. And we need to put a police officer in each shelter to make sure these people are protected and their belongings are protected, and make sure that they have the services that they need. We're not doing either. In fact, when we all raised issues, not only me but other elected officials, and even homeless advocate groups like Picture the Homeless, what did he do? He hired a private security company instead of police officers. I had 2 homeless shelters that opened in my district in hotels. They were right on the Queens-Nassau border, far away from public transportation. I mean, part of my district is a transit desert. You can only get buses, and even that is in short supply. So where are these people going to get services? They were even lucky if they could get their kids to school when it came to families. And eventually the community was very upset about it because there was no notification. So the city finally moved them out. It also goes to the point of what I said earlier about involving people, involving communities in the decision-making process. The mayor's going to have a fight opening these 90 shelters because right now there's no community notification requirement. And we've been negotiating with the administration to try and put some legislation into place, but so far he hasn't agreed to what we're suggesting. Talk to people. Talk to communities. I was at the protest in Maspeth for the Holiday Inn homeless shelter that the city wanted to put there. And the community was really opposed. The community board suggested other sites in one ear and out the other with this administration. Again, I think people would do the right thing, but let's have a conversation. Because we all know we have to do something about the homeless population. But you're not going to succeed if you just dictate to people rather than involving them.
So a big affordable housing issue that doesn't get talked about enough is rent regulation, the role that plays in preserving affordable housing. In 2015, the rent regs came up for renewal. There were some modest reforms, change to the threshold for decontrol. Advocates were left wanting more since that system loses a lot of units each year. The IDC, of which you're part, was seen as not being as strong an advocate as they could to push the Republicans in the Senate to agree to stronger rent regulations. Did IDC do all it could?
Absolutely. The IDC, for your viewers who don't know, that's the Independent Democratic Conference. We're a conference other than the mainline Democrats. We pushed as much as we can, but the Republicans are traditionally support the landlords, and they're in the majority. They can do whatever they want. They have, with Democrat Simca Felder, who ran on the Republican line, they have 32. So they don't need the IDC for anything. We try and get what we can done. But when the Republicans don't want to do something, there's nothing we can do. And I must tell you that I was elected in the 2010 campaign. I took office in 2011. In 2009 and 2010, the Democrats were in control of the Senate. They didn't do the tenant protections when they had control. So the argument that the IDC somehow isn't pushing enough isn't true, because even when the Democrats for 2 years, out of the list, like 40 where the Republicans had control, they didn't even do the tenant protections. I've been a supporter, I'm 100% pro-tenant. Like I always, every year, support renewing when it comes up, the tenant regulations. And I'm a co-sponsor of the bill to end vacancy decontrol. But if the Republicans don't want to do it, all the talk in the world isn't going to help them. What we sometimes need is for the governor to get involved. Because if the governor gets involved, we can do some things in the budget or at the end of session when we do what is called the big ugly, where we put things in this one big bill where a lot gets passed because somebody, well, I like this, but I don't like that, but I'll vote for it because I want this. Where sometimes bills will not necessarily get passed on their own. So we've tried as much as we can. But again, even when the Democrats had control, they didn't do it.
So to close, let's go back to the campaign. Similar to conversations we had 8 years ago, you don't have that much money, you're behind in the polls, and that's what you have going for you. How do you pull it off?
Well, good question. First of all, there really hasn't been a poll of me and another, I think Salah Banis is still in the race. We're the only two Democrats that have officially announced against de Blasio. The polls that took place earlier, like the beginning of the year, had people who were never going to run, like the controller who said he's not going to run, the public advocate who said she's not going to run, some of the borough presidents. So that diluted the effect. There really hasn't been an accurate poll since then. In terms of the money, oh yeah, I'm in trouble. I admit it because I'm not going for, I'm going to use the expression dark money. It's money from the big donors who want something in return, like from the real estate industry. I want the average person to donate because that's who I'm going to be responsible to, not the big donors who control the system, because once you sell your soul to those individuals, you're gone. So you can get elected, you're not going to be able to do anything that really makes real change. So I'm relying on individual donors, and unfortunately it's not been easy. Because the very people, the average person, doesn't have the money to donate. You know, it's sort of a catch-22 situation, but I made a promise to myself when I was first running for public office for the city council. I'm going to do the right thing on every occasion. I don't care about the political consequences. So if I don't get elected, I don't get elected.
Well, sir, thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. All right, thanks a lot.
You good? Thank you.
Yeah, great.